thought anxiety and depression were just exaggerated feelings, something people clung to for attention or out of weakness. I'd hear about someone needing time off for their mental health, and I'd silently scoff. Life is hard. Everyone deals with stress. You just push through it, right? That's what I told myself. Until one day, I couldn't. It started small, almost unnoticeable. A sense of unease before meetings, a tightness in my chest that came and went. Little things I could brush off. But slowly, like a fog rolling in over familiar streets, the unease grew heavier. I began to feel trapped in moments that used to be normal. A conversation, a phone call, even choosing what to wear would make my heart race. I didn't understand it. And worse, I couldn't explain it. No one prepares you for the moment when your mind stops being your ally. When your thoughts no longer guide you but instead haunt you. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in day by day, thought by thought. I kept thinking I was just tired, just overwhelmed, that it would pass. But it didn't. It got louder. It got darker. The worst part wasn't the panic attacks or the sleepless nights. It was the shame. The shame of not being able to control what was happening inside me. Of pretending I was okay when every fiber of my being was screaming. I was sinking, silently, and I didn't know how to ask for help. Or even if I deserved it. How does something meant to protect you end up destroying you from the inside? That's what anxiety does. It starts as a signal, a warning. But when it spirals, it becomes a storm that never ends. And unless you've been in it, you can't imagine how invisible and terrifying it truly is. This is my story, the one I never thought I'd tell, of how I got lost in my own mind, of how I broke, and maybe, just maybe, how I found a way back. Fear in its purest form is a gift. It's the ancient alarm system that has kept humans alive for centuries. A rustle in the bushes, a drop in temperature, a strange look from a stranger. Fear notices what we don't. And anxiety? It's fear's overachieving cousin. It plans, prepares, predicts. It helps us study for exams, rehearse for interviews, remember to bring an umbrella just in case. But what happens when the helpful voice inside your head becomes a dictator? When it doesn't stop after you've done the prep? When it keeps whispering, keeps warning, long after the danger has passed, or worse, when there was never any danger to begin with? I used to think I had good instincts, that my anxiety was a strength. It made me thorough, detail-oriented, responsible, until it started eating up entire nights with thoughts I couldn't control, until it turned a simple errand into a gauntlet of imaginary worst-case scenarios. Let me take you back to a moment that seemed small but changed everything. I had an upcoming job interview. I'd prepared thoroughly, notes, practice questions, even what I'd wear. And yet, the night before, my brain would not rest. What if you stutter? What if they ask something you don't know? What if they can see how nervous you are? These questions replayed endlessly, looping louder and louder. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I showed up to the interview shaking, unable to focus. My anxiety had created the very failure it feared. This became a pattern. The more I tried to prevent bad outcomes, the more paralyzed I became. Tasks as simple as checking email or calling someone I loved began to terrify me. I'd rehearse what to say in my head a dozen times, and still hang up before the call connected. I lived in a constant state of preparation, of planning, but never acting. The problem was, anxiety wasn't content with being helpful. It wanted control. Total control. It began flooding my mind with what-ifs. What if I forget something? What if I offend someone? What if I faint in public? What if I never feel normal again? It felt like having an overprotective parent living in my head 24/7, always yelling, always catastrophizing, never letting me rest. And yet I trusted it more than I trusted myself. I began to think, if I don't listen, something bad will happen. But the anxiety didn't make me safer. It made me smaller. I avoided gatherings. I stopped taking new opportunities. I canceled plans. I stopped doing things I once loved. Because everything felt risky. The irony was cruel. I was so afraid of losing control that I surrendered all control to my fear. There's a metaphor that stuck with me. Imagine a smoke detector that goes off not just during fires, but every time you make toast. At first, you might unplug it temporarily, but then you forget to plug it back in. Or worse, you learn to live with the noise. That was my life. My brain's alarm system was going off constantly, and instead of questioning it, I obeyed. I stopped cooking. I stopped toasting. I stopped living. Eventually, I realized I wasn't experiencing normal anxiety anymore. I was living with an anxiety disorder, a chronic, irrational, exhausting state of hyperalertness, a fire alarm that wouldn't shut up, and the cruelest part? No one could see it. I looked fine on the outside, calm, functional. Inside, I was unraveling. But because I could still show up, still smile, still say, "I'm fine," no one knew how much I was suffering. This invisible war was changing me. I started forgetting who I was before the fear took over. I lost confidence. I lost curiosity. I lost spontaneity. Every decision became a battle. Should I go to that event? Should I send that email? Should I say what I really feel? Every question carried 1,000 hidden fears. And I was tired. So tired. Anxiety had promised to protect me, but all it had done was imprison me. That's when I knew something had to change. But at the time, I didn't know how. I didn't even know where to begin. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this. And that realization, quiet and terrified as it was, would be the first crack in the wall I'd built around myself. There's a particular kind of dread that comes with waking up and realizing the battle has already begun. Your eyes aren't fully open yet, but the pounding in your chest is unmistakable. You haven't moved a muscle, haven't even spoken a word, and yet, it's already there. The fear, the tightness, the silent scream inside your ribs. That's what it felt like every morning for me. Like being thrown into deep water the second I woke up, struggling to breathe. Even though I was in my own bed. There was no obvious reason for it, nothing had happened yet. But my body was already reacting like something terrible was just seconds away. And that's the thing about anxiety when it turns chronic. It stops needing a reason. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had too much coffee. I'd tell myself. Maybe it's just stress from work. It'll pass. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And eventually, I stopped asking why. I started organizing my life around the fear. I avoided elevators, afraid I'd get stuck, and panic. I stopped sitting at the center of crowded rooms just in case I needed to escape. I carried water, gum, and medication everywhere like a soldier with survival gear. I rehearsed every conversation before speaking and left places early with made-up excuses just to avoid the feeling of losing control. But here's what no one tells you. The more you avoid the fear, the more it grows. And the more it grows, the smaller your world becomes. One day I was walking into a grocery store, something I'd done 100 times before. But this time my vision blurred. My legs weakened. My heart galloped so hard I thought I was dying. Wasn't. It was a panic attack. I dropped the basket, walked straight out, and sat shaking in my car for over an hour. That day I didn't go back inside. That week I didn't go anywhere at all. From that point on, the fear was no longer just in my mind. It had colonized my body. It dictated how I walked, how I breathed, how I ate, even how I slept. The simplest tasks became calculated risks. Making a phone call felt like stepping on a landmine. Eating in a restaurant felt like being on a stage with a spotlight on my trembling hands, and because no one could see it, they didn't understand. You're just overthinking it. Don't be so dramatic. Just relax. People said those things with good intentions, but their words felt like knives. How could I explain that I wanted to relax more than anything? That I would have given anything to feel normal again? The isolation became unbearable. I stopped reaching out. I stopped talking about it. I started pretending harder, smiling more, nodding more, telling people, I'm just tired, instead of, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Inside, I was screaming, but outside, I looked fine. That disconnect made everything worse. I began to wonder if no one can see me breaking, did it even matter? I remember lying in bed one night, completely exhausted but unable to sleep. My heart was racing, my limbs tingling, and I was drenched in sweat even though the room was cold. I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just shut it off? That night, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living like this forever. Every day felt like I was carrying an invisible backpack filled with bricks. Bricks of fear, shame, guilt, exhaustion. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't put it down. I started questioning everything. Who was I before all this? When did I stop laughing for real? Why did sunlight feel like a threat and silence like a scream? There were moments when I felt like I was watching my life through a fogged-up window. Like I was there, but not really. Talking, moving, doing all the right things, but not feeling any of them. That sense of disconnection, of being hollowed out, was worse than fear. It was numbness. And yet beneath that numbness there was still something clawing inside me, a kind of wild desperation, a part of me that refused to give up no matter how tired I was. I remember staring at the bathroom mirror one morning. I looked older, paler. My eyes carried stories they shouldn't have to carry. I pressed my hands to the counter, trying to ground myself, and whispered, "Please, just one normal day. Just one." But there were no normal days. Not then. What I was experiencing wasn't just being anxious. It was an unrelenting state of alarm, a false fire drill that never ended. My nervous system had been hijacked. My brain couldn't tell the difference between real danger and imagined threat anymore. And when you live like that long enough, something inside you breaks. I stopped dreaming. I stopped making plans. I stopped hoping, because hope started to feel dangerous. What if I got my hopes up and failed? What if I tried something and it made things worse? So I did nothing. I lived in a cage I couldn't see but felt everywhere. A cage built from questions with no answers and fear with no exit. My world had narrowed to 4 walls and a constant echo of doubt. I know it sounds dramatic, but if you've been there, if you've truly lived inside the grip of anxiety, you know I'm not exaggerating. You know how loud silence can get, how heavy your own breath can feel, how exhausting it is to pretend all the time. That was my life, and I didn't know how to get out. But in the darkest moments, something quietly began to shift. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something more raw. A whisper, not a scream. A quiet rebellion inside me that said, "This can't be it. This can't be all there is." And even though I had no answers, no roadmap, no certainty, I had that whisper. And that whisper was enough to keep me going. When you're drowning, your instinct is to fight, to flail, to kick, to rise back to the surface at all costs. That's what I did when the anxiety took hold. I fought it with everything I had. I read every article I could find about managing anxiety. I downloaded all the apps. I tried meditation, deep breathing, cold showers, and positive affirmations. I cut out caffeine, started running every morning, forced myself to write gratitude lists. Everyone told me, just change your mindset. So I tried. I repeated mantras. I wrote sticky notes with quotes like, "You are in control," and "Choose joy." I recited them daily. I forced a smile when I felt like crying. I kept telling myself I was healing, but deep down, I wasn't healing. I was resisting. I was waging war against myself, demanding that the fear go away. I believed that if I worked hard enough, I could fix myself. And when that didn't work, the guilt crushed me. The more I fought the fear, the more it fought back. It didn't shrink. It grew. Like a shadow cast by a flickering light, my anxiety stretched itself into every corner of my day. The harder I tried to push it away, the tighter it gripped me. It was like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The pressure built with every second, and when it finally burst through, the panic was worse than ever. I remember one morning in particular. I had just finished a guided meditation, 10 minutes of breathing and visualization just like the app said. But the moment it ended, my chest tightened. My heart started racing. A familiar fog of dizziness crept in. "No," I whispered. "Not now. I just meditated. I did everything right." But my body didn't care. The panic came anyway. And with it came the shame. That was the day I realized something. Healing isn't about getting rid of anxiety. It's about changing your relationship with it. But I wasn't there yet. I was still caught in a cycle of control. Anxiety made me feel helpless, so I responded by trying to take control of everything. My sleep, my diet, my thoughts, my schedule. I thought if I could just do everything perfectly, I'd be safe. But life doesn't work like that. And neither does healing. I started avoiding anything that triggered even a hint of discomfort. I skipped social events. I turned down opportunities. I clung to routines so rigid that any change sent me into a tailspin. That's when the fear of fear began. I wasn't just afraid of panic attacks. I was afraid of feeling anxious at all. Every twinge of adrenaline, every flutter in my chest, every random thought became a potential threat. I feared losing control in public. I feared passing out. I feared fainting while driving, choking while eating, collapsing while walking. And because I feared those things, my brain interpreted them as real threats. My nervous system was on red alert 24/7. My fight or flight switch had broken, stuck, in the on position. I lived in a constant state of scanning, checking my body, checking my surroundings, waiting for the next wave. This constant hypervigilance was exhausting. I was mentally, emotionally, physically drained. I started experiencing new symptoms: tight throat, tingling fingers, vision distortions. Of course, this only made me spiral further. Every new symptom became proof that something was terribly wrong, and every reassurance I received from doctors or therapists, it didn't last. Because deep down, I didn't trust anyone, not even myself. Here's what no one tells you. Trying to escape anxiety only makes it worse. Because when you treat a feeling like an enemy, you give it power. I began to realize that my fight wasn't with anxiety itself. It was with my own fear of anxiety. I was afraid of what it said about me, afraid of what others would think if they knew, afraid it meant I was broken beyond repair. This internal war was brutal. Some nights I lay awake whispering to myself, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay," like a lullaby. Other nights, I would cry quietly into my pillow, afraid even of my own voice. What made it worse was the loneliness. Because I couldn't explain it, not properly. People heard anxiety and thought of butterflies before a speech. What I was dealing with was a monster with invisible claws. It robbed me of joy, of presence, of connection. I was there, but not really. One day, after a particularly rough night, I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes sunken. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me, and that's when I hit a breaking point. Not the dramatic kind. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit. Just stillness, a bone-deep exhaustion, the sense that I couldn't fight anymore. That day, I stopped meditating. I stopped reading self-help books. I stopped trying to fix myself. And in the silence that followed, something unexpected happened. I felt the smallest flicker of peace. Not because the anxiety was gone, but because for the first time in months I wasn't resisting it. I just let it be. It was terrifying and freeing, like sitting next to a storm instead of inside it. That day didn't heal me, but it changed something. It gave me a glimpse of a different path. One where healing wasn't about eliminating fear, but learning to coexist with it. That shift didn't happen all at once. It was slow, uneven, full of setbacks. But it was real, and it began with surrender, not defeat, but acceptance. That's the paradox no one tells you. You don't overcome anxiety by fighting harder. You overcome it by no longer needing to win. Collapse doesn't always look like screaming or sobbing or dramatic breakdowns. Sometimes it's quiet, almost invisible, like a slow leak in a tire where the pressure drains bit by bit until one day you realize you can't go any further. That's what it felt like for me. There wasn't one big moment. No final straw. Just a slow descent into a place where everything felt too heavy. Conversations, errands, even brushing my teeth. My to-do list became a museum of things I meant to do but couldn't start. Everything took more effort than I had to give. One morning I stayed in bed longer than usual, not because I was sleepy, but because I couldn't see the point in getting up. The sunlight filtering through the blinds made me feel more exposed than comforted. The world felt too loud, too demanding. I just wanted stillness. Silence. At first, I thought I was just having a bad day. Then it became a bad week. Then months passed and I could barely remember what good felt like. The anxiety that once made my heart race had now given way to a numbness that scared me more than any panic ever had, because at least panic meant I was feeling something. This was emptiness. I started to disappear from my own life. I ghosted friends, stopped replying to messages, stopped returning calls. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to someone that even answering a text feels like lifting a boulder? I stopped laughing, stopped singing in the shower, stopped noticing the taste of food. It was like living underwater, sounds muffled, movements slow, everything distant. Some days I'd sit on the floor and stare at the wall for hours, unable to remember how I got there. Other days I'd scroll endlessly on my phone just to avoid thinking, and yet I still smiled when people asked how I was. Doing okay, I'd lie, because the truth felt too heavy, too confusing. Even to me. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream. I was too tired. I wasn't even sure what I was mourning. I just knew something inside me had cracked. What made it worse was how invisible it all was. From the outside, I still looked fine. I could show up when I had to. I could put on the mask, but inside, I felt like I was vanishing. And no one noticed. Not really. Because when you're high-functioning and quiet about your pain, people assume you're okay. They don't see the effort it takes just to exist. I started questioning everything. Who am I if I can't function? Who am I if I don't contribute? What's the point of all this if I feel nothing? Those questions haunted me in the early hours of the morning, when the world was asleep and my mind refused to be quiet. I wasn't suicidal in the traditional sense. I didn't want to die. But I also didn't want to live like this. It felt like being stuck in limbo, caught between surviving and truly living. Some nights I'd find myself whispering, I can't do this anymore. Not dramatically, just honestly. And yet there was a part of me, small, barely audible, that refused to give up. Even when I didn't believe in myself, that voice whispered, maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. That whisper became my anchor. I didn't try to heal. I didn't have the strength. But I started doing small things. I opened the window, let in fresh air, sat outside for 5 minutes, ate half a meal, brushed my hair, showered. They were tiny acts, almost meaningless, on their own, but together, they were resistance. Not the frantic resistance from before, but quiet, gentle resistance. A kind that said, you're still here. You still matter. I began to notice moments again. A breeze on my face, the sound of birds, The way warm tea felt in my hands. They didn't fix me, but they reminded me I was still alive. I wasn't healed. I wasn't happy, but I was awake. And that was the beginning. Not the end of my struggle. Not a triumph over darkness. Just a flicker of something else. Something softer than hope, but maybe more powerful. Curiosity. What if I didn't have to stay here forever? What if healing wasn't about fixing myself, but about finding new ways to be with myself? That thought didn't change everything overnight, but it changed enough. Enough to get out of bed the next day. Enough to send one message to someone I trusted. Enough to admit, I'm not okay. And that single act, telling the truth, was the first real step towards something new. The collapse wasn't the end. It was the clearing where I would slowly, quietly begin to rebuild. And I wasn't alone anymore. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what happened when I finally began to let people in. When I stopped pretending. When I found out that healing doesn't happen in isolation, but in connection. Stay with me. The story isn't over yet. That whisper became my lifeline. Not a cure, not a miracle, but a beginning. It told me to get up, even if just for 5 minutes, to shower, to eat, to speak, even if the words felt fake. Healing didn't come as a sunrise. It came as a flicker, in the dark. And I followed it. I began reading stories of others like me. I realized I wasn't weak. I wasn't broken. I was human. And being human means sometimes we fall apart. I stopped trying to silence the anxiety. I started listening to it. Not believing it, not feeding it, just noticing, letting it pass. That simple shift changed everything. Therapy helped. Journaling helped. Time helped. But most of all, honesty helped. Being honest with myself, with others, with the pain. I still have anxious days. I still have bad nights. But I am no longer afraid of them. They come, they pass, and I remain. This isn't a story about overcoming, it's a story about beginning. Again and again, as many times as it takes. Because healing is not a finish line. It's a path, and if you're on it, even if you're crawling, you're doing better than you think. They say the darkest hour is just before dawn. In the next episode, I'll tell you what happened when I stopped running and started reclaiming my life. Stay tuned.